Impeachment talk grows among Democrats in Congress trying to remove the president from office. There's a party switch in the Iowa State Legislature, and Illinois' governor finds himself under federal investigation. All things we'll talk about this morning with Tracy Kurowski, Scott County Democratic Party Central Committee member, and Scott County Republican Party Chair David Millers. Welcome both of you back to the program.
Thank you.
Great to see you as always.
Nice to you.
We'll begin with the Illinois governor. Federal investigators are looking into possible fraud committed by J.B. Pritzker, his wife, his brother-in-law, and an associate regarding a property tax break the governor claimed on one of his mansions in Chicago. It involved disconnecting toilets to claim it was unlivable and get that tax relief. The investigation brings back an issue that came up during his campaign. I guess the question is, how much could this derail the governor's agenda on things like income tax reform? I imagine it hurts his credibility a bit here, David.
Well, sure it does, but he's got such an overwhelming majority in the legislature that I don't think his agenda is in jeopardy, because that's their agenda too.
Sure. What about the federal investigation itself, though? Just being under a federal investigation, if something comes of it, that certainly hampers him, right?
I don't think so. I don't think it hampers his agenda, because he's got such overwhelming majorities, and his agenda is Madigan's agenda and Culberson's agenda. I mean, I don't think it hurts it.
Tracy, your take on this? It's got to be a stain on the Democratic Party. Certainly if something is uncovered by investigators who say he's done something wrong, which could maybe even hurt his potential length and term of office.
Sure, and as with any federal investigation, I think we should let the process play out. A lot of this investigation happens behind the scenes, and whether it's real or rumored, let it play out. Anything else that we can do right now is just speculation. But what I always think is interesting about any investigation is always the timing of it. So it came up last year during the election, governor still won, and now it's coming up at a time when he's actually trying to unroll a really progressive tax policy. I'd rather be talking about that. I'd rather be talking about how the state can implement a progressive tax system like what we have in Iowa. But just as that's being unrolled, just as the state is about to vote on it and bring it to the voters for a referendum in the 2020 election, now we're talking about Toiletgate again. I'd rather talk about a progressive income tax and how we can actually fix the revenue system in Illinois.
Well, we have talked about the progressive income tax as a whole on this program, but I think it is interesting when the governor is coming under a target as a federal investigation. Let's move on to our second topic here. Iowa State Representative Andy McKean made a big decision this week. The longtime Republican announced he is joining the Democratic Party. We've seen this more often from politicians who move from the minority party to join the majority. This is the opposite in this case. McKean says the Republican Party, in his eyes, isn't what it used to be, and that he's not happy with the president's behavior, all reasons why he says he's making the switch. I guess how significant is this that he's doing it while in office? We've seen other people do it lately while they've just been out of office, essentially. And does it signal anything about the future here, Tracy?
Well, I canvassed in that district back in 2016. What I can tell you is families in Maquoketa, in and around Anamosa, care about keeping good union jobs. They care about fully funding education. The party that is in control in Iowa right now isn't doing that. I think his quotes about this is not the party that he grew up in, right? He's Iowa's longest serving Republican legislator, are indicative of the fact that the values that are being promulgated by this party aren't even traditional Republican values. And I think it's also interesting to note that Representative McKean didn't just leave the Republican Party to become an independent, but he actually left the Republican Party to become a Democrat. When he made the announcement, he was flanked by Democrat Minority Leader in the House, Todd Pritzker. And it's really interesting to me to watch this play out. I feel excited about welcoming McKean to the party. He's got a lot of experience, and I look forward to what he has to say and what he can bring to the Democratic Party.
David, doesn't change the majority at all for Iowa Republicans.
No, it doesn't. And I know Andy. I served with him. He was in the legislature. He was a veteran by the time I joined the legislature in 1991. He'd already been there 12 years. So I knew Andy and worked with him. And I think it's an act of betrayal to his voters, the people who put him in, to his contributors, to his volunteers. All those people worked to elect a Republican. And there hasn't been that much of a change since he was elected last November. And in fact, he went to the Republican Party of Iowa and received a contribution of over $100,000 from his campaign, from the Republican Party. And to turn his back on the Republican Party so early after that is just an act of betrayal.
Wow. Strong words there. We'll move on to one more topic before we go. More Democrats on Capitol Hill are sounding the call to begin impeachment proceedings against President Trump in the aftermath of the Mueller report. They cite obstruction of justice as the reason to pursue it. This has the party weighing politics versus what it considers principle. Republicans had their own dilemma in the impeachment of Bill Clinton. There can be a political price to pay, certainly when the ultimate outcome is likely to be the status quo, as I think we argued here. Both parties complain about a divided country and wanting to fix that. I guess how can this be the right approach if that's the goal? David?
How can this be what?
The right approach if that's the goal, to have a united country, and this is something that could further potentially divide the country.
Well, of course it does. And as far as the politics are concerned, there are different times and a different person and Donald Trump and Bill Clinton and Richard Nixon even. When impeachment proceedings were brought against Nixon, he had an approval rate of about 45%, and it was half that by the time the impeachment hearings were over with. Bill Clinton's popularity actually rose during the time of his impeachment. So I don't think you can look at history as any guide in this. And I would think it probably could only hurt the Democrats, though.
Yeah, there is a political price to pay on something like this, Tracy. Would you agree?
Possibly. I think the truth matters, though. I do see that an impeachment trial would distract from the important work that we have in this election year, or going into the presidential election.
We're pretty much in the election cycle, yeah.
Right. But I think we do need to do both. I think we need to shine a light of truth and find out what exactly happened. The Mueller report was heavily redacted, and there are parts of it that the American public are not going to see. I think that through congressional investigations, maybe we can find out more. If through the investigatory process we find more evidence that makes it impossible to do anything but impeach, we ought to go that route. Truth matters.
Well, we'll see how that does play out, because there are difficult decisions that need to be made, certainly on both parties. David Millers, Tracy Karowski, thanks so much.
Can I add a rejoinder to that?
I wish I could, David. We're out of time. Thanks for the conversation.